Hey everybody. I'm not breaking any news today, but I wanted to give you some context to something. I think you guys have seen early on when I said, really, I think one of the most reputable news organizations still is the New York Times. And they proved it a couple of days ago when the reporter was grilling Donald Trump on his assertions that the Iranians had killed people in their own school with their own missiles, which is starting to show even more that the preliminary reports from inside the Department of Defense suggest otherwise. And that's been reported by the New York Times. That's not why I'm here today. I read a piece on the new leader, who I didn't know much about because he hasn't been very visible over the years when his father was supreme leader of Iran. His father was Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and his name is Mujtaba Khamenei. And he's 56 years old, a couple years younger than me, but he looks a lot older. He's got a lot of pressure on him, and he's got the weight of the Islamic State on his back. When I say Islamic State, I mean the Republic of Iran. And I think there's something in that story that I read that's just one paragraph long that I really want you to think about. We're talking about destroying Iran, leadership, the leadership within Iran, the regime within Iran. And I've said many times before that it's much more difficult to destroy an ideology than it is a government and the buildings around it. And you're never going to destroy the ideology of the fundamentalists and very conservative viewpoints of those people who are running the government in Iran. And there's a big expectation there that somehow by us bombing things and taking out a couple layers of their leadership and maybe even some of their military commands and buildings and weapons and all that stuff, that somehow these leaders on the opposition, school kids riding the streets and professors and intellects and people who are not so diehard conservative Muslims are somehow going to rise up and take over that government. First of all, that's not going to happen, not without some type of plan and support from other countries. And the last time we did that in the 1950s, it ended up with the Shah of Iran, who ended up being the sole reason why we had the Islamic Revolution in the first place, because he was so brutal and difficult to the people of the country that they rose up against him. And then we had, since 1979, I've had what we've had. And we've been considered the great Satan ever since. But there's still a lot of people inside Iran who are moderates and who yearn for a life that they once knew before. But they can't fight. They don't have weapons. What are you going to take on the Republican Guard, which is one of the most difficult militaries in the world to fight? Your civilians are going to take them on by what? With no weapons whatsoever? They're not going to run in the streets with RPGs and take on the Republican Guard. They don't have tanks. They don't have armored personnel carriers. They don't have air power. They don't have military training. So it's a pipe dream. But this is more important. This is what I saw today in the New York Times in Mr. Khamenei's biography. It said his father, had been killed by the Israeli airstrikes on a leadership compound in the heart of Tehran. Also on February 28th, the new supreme leader's mother, his wife, and a son, as well as top Iranian defense officials, were also killed. Now, I want you to think about this. Just put yourself in his shoes, okay? And you can think whatever you think about him, that he's evil, that he's the devil incarnate. You can think anything you want. Doesn't matter. I'm not asking you to think he's a good guy or a bad guy. But I am asking you to consider this. If somebody killed your father, killed your mother, killed your wife, and then one of your children, and then you were wounded in that airstrike, there's reports that his legs were wounded and that he hasn't been seen since in public or anything like that. He never was seen in public much before anyways. If somebody did that, killed your father, your wife, your mother, and one of your sons, are you going to give up the battle against the great Satan? I mean, it's not funny, but it's fucking funny because these people somehow think that they're going to change the ideology. You've just hardened the ideology. And yeah, sure, you can go after and try to kill all of them. But I think you need to understand that, diplomacy matters. Going in and trying to send Wyckoff and Jared Kushner in there to, some real estate people to negotiate on behalf of the American government, is nobody asking why those guys were doing that work? They're wholly unqualified to discuss anything diplomatically. You know? And you got a drunk National Guard major running the Pentagon, and all he has to say about war is, we're going to hit him harder today. I mean, it's like he's playing Minecraft or something. I mean, everything that comes out of his mouth, nothing is strategy, it's all like how bad he's going to kick somebody's ass, like he's a schoolyard bully. That is not good military leadership. I can promise you, I've been around a lot of them. And I can promise you, they don't think like that. They don't talk like that. And then you got Donald Trump, the most lying president in the history of the United States, who knows so little about military, dodged the draft 5 times. I think he went to military school. Wow. And then he came out a couple weeks ago and said he thinks he should give himself the Medal of Honor. You know? Thought that was funny. Made fun of the media for bringing that up as something they might talk about. You bet your ass we talk about it, because it's an honor bestowed on the most sacred of military veterans, who some of which gave their life posthumously and were awarded the medal, and some of which lived through the biggest hell he'd ever thought of in his life. And he's making fun about it like he should give himself one. Test himself. Test the courts to see if he could give himself that. So you've got clowns. I mean, all they're short of is the big red noses and the big shoes running this country. The fact that you would put Jared Kushner, a Jewish guy from New York, who's a real estate guy, and another real estate guy in charge of negotiating peace in the Middle fucking East. But it should not surprise us at all, right? You got a WWE person running the Department of Education. You've got Dr. Oz in a cabinet position. This is a guy who was selling everything but real medicine. You know, you've got, RFK Jr., who hates vaccines, running the Department of Health and Human Services. You've got the newest appointee who's got congressional hearings to, confirm him, but Senator from Oklahoma, Mark Wayne Mullen, who is a plumber by trade, has an associate degree, the only guy in the Senate who does not have a bachelor's degree. Wow, what a pick to run DHS, Department of Homeland Security, which is in charge of counterterrorism, anti-terrorism issues in this country, helping weed that out, in charge of like ICE. This is a guy who tried to pick fights when he was in, Senate hearings with witnesses. He's going to be running ICE. And, emergency management from FEMA, which we know doesn't hardly exist anymore because they've cut all the funding and they won't give any money away to people who are in need. These are the people he's choosing. I could go on and on and on. So the fact that they don't understand that this new supreme leader's whole family was wiped out in one of our airstrikes, and these guys are not going to give up. You had the government of Iran say the other day that they were not willing yet to go to negotiate for peace. Little backdoor, hey, you want to maybe talk about peace? No, they're like, no, we don't need that. We'll continue with our drone strikes and our missile strikes. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And trust me, they're going to keep doing that. They don't give a shit now. And if you killed somebody's family and you were the leader of the country and you survived it, you really think they're going to sue for peace? Please, people. Even fucking Georgie, you know that's silly, right? Even Georgie knows that's silly. These people have not got a clue. Not a clue whatsoever. Okay, join us on Substack tonight, where we're going to start our first installment of a series about the Jeffrey Epstein files. I got a data guy who's going to start partnering with me, and we're working together to try to find out what we can find out about what's been released already. There's tons of great reporting on it from lots of people who've been on it for years, frankly. And I'm not going to try to play catch up. I'm just going to talk through what we can find out through this great guy who knows data really well, knows AI really well. He's a computer scientist, and he's been studying it for all of, the Epstein files for all of 4 weeks. But it's extraordinary, the kind of stuff he's finding and what we're going to continue to find while we're working together. So like, follow, and share. Meet us on our Substack at From the Writer's Cabin. Paid subscriptions will get you everything you want. First couple episodes, we're just gonna let people see what we're talking about and give you a chance to to know our friend Rye, who's who's doing a lot of this work. And then he and I are going to be partnering on storytelling on how we're going to do this and start releasing stuff. So join us there. There's Georgie's shirt. Is that pretty accurate depiction of our boy? Right? How about that tail? Whoop, whoop. Like, follow, and share. See you guys tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Take care. Bye.